find me here just starting out this brand new linocut print project, and my very first job is to trace through the sketch that I've done here in my sketchbook of some lovely warty toads having lots of fun in a pond full of duckweed and froggies and dragonflies and all kinds of fun pond stuff. Pond stuff, my new technical term for the day. So I'm just lining up some layout paper here. This is slightly thicker than tracing paper, and the reason why I like to work in layout paper first for the very first trace that I do is because the line work on my sketch is obviously very sketchy, very loose, and I want some defined lines, and I find that tracing paper is so transparent it's difficult for my brain to then work out where that perfect crisp median line should be for all the details. I'm probably not explaining that terribly well, but either way, I find layout paper is perfect just for the first trace because it helps me to see enough of the line work underneath to guide my hand, but not so much so that I almost get there's sort of, what do they call it? When you've got so much choice that you can't decide where to go. I get that, but anyway, just going to speed things up a bit here because no one needs to see me draw all the details in a dragonfly's wings in real time. That is not what we signed up for. And I've just used my paper clips to fasten the layout paper at the top of the page so that I can occasionally lift the page, as you can see me doing occasionally here, and just double check that I am following the correct lines. Again, it's difficult to find that balance between how much detail is going to be enough and how much is going to be just too much. Especially when I'm thinking ahead to what the final linocut print is going to look like. I've got a very fine sort of nib to my pencil. I love these technical pencils. You can get such a needle fine point on them. But I need to be cognizant of how much detail I can reasonably create within a linocut print. Especially at this size, this is going to fit on an A4 piece of paper, and it's going to be a relatively snug fit. So I just need to be cognizant of getting that balance between all those bristling details that I love and not flooding areas of the final print with so much detail that it can end up looking like a bit of a mess. Somehow a bit cloudy. Again, I'm probably not describing that terribly well, but all will become clear in the later videos when we actually start doing the print work itself. But this is, I have to say, a very nice meditative activity. I do rather like these early stages of the process where I'm just having fun drawing. It's like being a kid again, those afternoons where you could just sit on the floor with some scrap paper and some probably rather crappy pencils and chewed felt tip pens and just draw stuff. Obviously I'm being a little bit more considered in my movements here than I might have been back then, but it certainly conjures that same sense of joy of just being able to get lost in a project and enjoy that feeling when you enter a flow state and time just doesn't seem to exist anymore, or if it does, it certainly doesn't work in quite the same way. Now this is the fun part, going in and doing the details on the toads themselves. Mr. Toad and Mrs. Toad are having a good time here, obviously. So they're having a little piggyback ride in all the murky duckweed. I do love toads and frogs. Any animals that maybe aren't considered traditionally attractive, or perhaps have associations with, you know, superstition and witchcraft and that sort of thing. I just think they're gorgeous, and drawing all of these lumps and bumps and wrinkles in the toad's skin is, I have to say, a very, very pleasing activity. Less pleasing is the duckweed. I have to say, duckweed is basically, you know, that really sort of pea soup green scummy stuff you see on the surface of ponds. Quite pretty to look at, actually, but such a pain in the bum to draw. So I'm not drawing every single little leaf of duckweed. That would be madness. I do have a plan for how I'm going to represent the details in that duckweed later, but yeah, more of that to come. No spoilers. You'll have to watch one of the future videos to see what I do about solving that problem. And I've tried within this composition to get a sense of 3 worlds, if you like. There's the world above with the dragonfly, the iris, and all those reeds, everything that's coming up out of the water. There's the surface of the water itself, with the duckweed and the lily pads. And then there's this very murky, dark world beneath, where the toads and their toad spawn are suspended. And toad spawn, if you've never seen it, is quite distinct from frog spawn. They look essentially the same. It's like, you know, white jelly with little black dots in it. But whereas frog spawn is this big sort of cloudy gelatinous mass, toad spawn just sort of forms into these very sort of neat noodles of double rows of eggs, which is a lot more fun to depict, I have to say. If I'd done frog spawn in a mass of duckweed, it would probably have ended up looking up quite homogeneous. So I mean, that's not the intention. I wanted to do toads, and toad spawn looks cool. It's just a happy accident that compositionally it looks a bit more appealing. I'd say at this point I don't have a very clear plan for how I'm going to tackle those shady areas in the cut itself. I will probably kind of work that out as I go along. Same with the lilies. The lilies were a bit of an afterthought. Well, not an afterthought necessarily. I had the lily pads there initially, and then because we had an iris, I thought, it would make sense to actually show the lily flowers. And native lilies, I should say, in the UK are teeny tiny. So that's why some of the scale might look a little bit odd. If you're used to seeing those beautiful big sort of domestic lilies that you might normally see at a botanical garden, which I think are normally native to places across Asia. Anyway, enough waffling about lilies, because I now need to transfer this artwork to my block. And a couple of things to mention here. First is that I would normally do a second trace from my line work on the layout paper that I have here, then to tracing paper, just to refine all of those fine lines. But actually I'm very happy with this first trace just as it is. There isn't really anything I want to change. So I'm just going to do a little experiment to see if I can actually transfer the graphite from the layout paper to the line work without having to go through that whole extra step, because that will be a huge time saver for me if this works. So I've just used some bulldog clips to attach my layout paper to the block, I've lined it up with where I want the final artwork to be, and I'm just going in now with the back of a dessert spoon that it's not a special spoon, I have to say. I just nick a spoon from my cutlery drawer every time I need to use one, and yes, I do put it through the dishwasher after I'm done, so it's clean, but yeah, don't tell anyone else that I do that. I'm just putting a fair bit of pressure on here because I've never transferred artwork from the layout paper directly before, so I'm not sure how well this is going to work. It looks like it's doing okay though. I could get away with this. So I'm going to carry on regardless. The other thing to say is that I'm a little annoyed with myself. I bought these pieces of grey lino from the art shop, assuming they had been cut to A4 size. They look pretty much bang on A4 size, but no, they're not. They're actually a little bit too narrow. So I've had to do some creative thinking about how I'm going to work on the registration and alignment of the artwork on the block so that it ends up central on the paper when I come to actually carving and printing. For these series, I'm essentially just using the corner of the page and the corner of the block itself for registration, so I should be able to get away with it, just so long as I am canny about being consistent about which corner I am working from. So this is looking good. I'm not quite getting all the detail I need, so I'm going to keep going over it with my spoon, trying not to let the paper move around too much because then we end up losing detail, but I'm really happy with this. Not having to use tracing paper potentially ever again is a great boon. But through the magic of editing, we now find ourselves at the point where finally it's transferred properly. That was quite a lot of work, I have to say. I do get slightly stiff knuckles and wrists sometimes doing this, but yay, it has worked. I'm happy with that. So now we have, if I remove these bulldog clips, hopefully we'll see, yes, I know it's a little bit faint, but now we have a reverse image perfectly mirrored on my grey lino that I can start to work in. And now this is where the benefits of not having to do that second trace with the tracing paper really becomes apparent, because before I can carve this block I do need to ink the line work in with a biro. This is just a common or garden biro, cheap piece of plastic with ink in it basically, that I'm using for this. With the reason being it's indelible, it's not going to smudge once it's on the lino, it's basically there. So I do have to be careful with this part. If I got the transfer wrong in graphite, I can just go in with a rubber and erase my mistakes. So I'm just moving my panel light around, I'd say more for my benefit, I'm afraid, than yours, because I was blocking my own light. And it's late in the evening as I'm doing this activity, so I need a bit of extra light to see what I'm doing. I think on the footage it kind of blooms out the details, so sorry about that. But those details will gradually be revealed as I work through doing my second trace. And another advantage, I would say, of doing this trace in biro is that you can't get very fine lines with a biro. It will always be just a little bit squashy. And this really goes back to what I mentioned earlier about being cautious about the level of detail that I include, because if you have areas that are too fine, as I say, they end up just looking a little bit of a mess, because my tools, whilst I have some very fine-edged tools to work with, there's only so much detail they can achieve. And then when I'm working with the ink, because it's viscous stuff, there's only so much detail that it can pick up. And it's very easy to flood out all those finer areas if you're not careful. So the biro, because it can't achieve the same level, because a biro cannot achieve the same levels of fine detail, is what I was meant to say, it's actually a pretty good indicator of... I'm sorry, I really can't speak today. I don't know what's wrong with me. It's a good indicator of what the finished product will look like. Oh, finally. I'm sorry. I apologise, everyone. I must learn to speak English properly. So, yeah, I'm just, again, working on just the fine edges around where the duckweed is interfacing with things at the moment, just to give myself something to work on with the duckweed. There's no point in actually drawing it properly at this point. And whenever I do these borders that aren't perfectly square or uniformly rounded, I always find there's one that just doesn't quite look right, so I've had to do that a couple of times. And then making sure my insignia in the darkest, dankest corner there is aligned in such a way that looks compositionally pleasing. Just checking that I've got those dark, murky areas all marked in nicely there. Some of this will come out of the wash when we start to carve. And that is pretty much it for this stage. That's all I really need to do, so I hope you'll be able to join me for the next episode where we start actually carving the first layer. Until then, take care of yourself. Bye bye. Ta-ta for now.